So this is Mr. Madison's War by Gilbert Collins there. Nice CDG, good map. Point to point here, this is the setup for the campaign. The nice thing about this game is it's pretty short with 9 turns there. And we have setup here, Lower Canada, Upper Canada, your point to point along the route there for the British. They're kind of just strung out along this line, which from what I remember, if the Americans kind of can cut this line, everything down all upriver in Upper Canada will really kind of wither, have some major issues for supply and reinforcements. The other thing of this game is victory points, but it's controlling the lakes because each are with 2 victory points, and even Lake Champlain over here. But the a lot more spaces on the American side of the border. Has these nice setup cards. And from what I remember is, yeah, a lot of fighting happens along here because trying to cut that one line that the British have. So the British got to protect that. And along this border area here. But the cool thing about this game, it has 3 decks for each year. So this, and you don't play through it fully, if I remember correctly. To refresh my memory on the rules of each of the decks, so you never play the same cards all the time. And there's a pre-war deck here of 14 cards that both sides plays until the declaration of war starts. So even though this is the setup, you can use these cards to move everybody around, but you're not really attacking. So it kind of really creates a variable start. You don't use the cards the same every game, and making replay value on this game is pretty high. The also the units are nice and big and nice. The British have different unit designations, especially on these guys. That one, and then the regulars, the militia between the regulars and the ships. And so this is the preliminary thing. So since I haven't played this in quite some time, it's a refresher. And remembering from the play what's important, what's not, and see if that is, and if come up any other interesting play and ideas how it comes out. So on to the first. So this is the end of the first turn, spring summer 1812. Don't exactly know all the plays and what happened. Kind of had a pause in the middle of this for getting sick. So, but I do know is kind of stalemated here. Prescott and Dearborn fought it out here, but no one got pushed back. Some casualties. The British took Ontario and Erie, but Lake Huron was taken by the Americans. They got rid of the small boat there, but Fort Mackinac was taken, and not much activity down here. And yeah, it was pretty quiet. The hands were, if I remember correctly, were not so good for operations. So on to turn. This is the beginning of spring of 1813, and what makes this game nice is on the winter turn there was not much going on, checking supply and things. But what is nice is there are decks of cards for 1812, 1813, and 1814. And if you don't use all the cards from the previous deck, unlike Paths of Glory system where you keep the cards in the main deck, those cards for that year go away. What was not played was not played, so it creates a lot of nice replayability because each game will be completely different from others on what cards are played. And so for spring, a lot of activity. A little problem for the Americans down here. Dearborn and Wilkinson were captured, well, surrendered because they couldn't retreat when Drummond came down here, and Prescott came down the other side of the basically the Hudson Valley, Lake Champlain route, coming down here, and they only have just this small force here. The Americans were able to come out of Sachs Harbor and take back Undensburg, and then reinforcing here on the border along Niagara. But here for the Americans, actually pushed out and took Fort Malden, and Proctor is retreated back. But most of the lakes are being controlled by the British, except for Lake Huron. So, interesting summer and autumn turn. We'll be seeing how that, well, actually, the Americans will get all those guys in Albany, which they do need, and try to push back the invasion here. And so on to summer and autumn. So this is the status of the end of summer turn, just before the winter, which will just be checking supply. The British were able to come all the way down to Saratoga and fight a bit. Hampton tried to counterattack and held position, so that kind of stalemated there. But over here on the Buffalo, Fort Niagara area, Lindsay, probably totally butchering the name, he actually attacked from Buffalo, took Fort Erie. Brock counterattacked and failed by a roll, and he had good DRMs, and it failed when you roll really bad. Proctor and Harrison kind of stalemated here, and both sides had to use their cards to maintain supply for this coming winter, because there's large forces here on these spots, so they had to use cards to do supply depots. And yeah, so have to calculate the victory points and check the supply for all the guys for the winter, and then it will be on to 1814 spring. So after calculating the VPs, the British are all the way up to 17 points, where the Americans are just over 11. So if the British get a few more points, they win decisive victory. So we shall see how things go. So this is the end of the spring and summer of 1814. A lot of activity here. Harrison had Port Dover and making ports on Lake Erie, and Perry came out and destroyed the fleet on Lake Erie, so they have control over that. And then he countered, actually the British countered attacked from Beaver Dam with Brock against Fort Erie, and Proctor also countered attack against Harrison with his weaker forces after winter, and it all failed, and they couldn't take Port Dover back before Perry came out and knocked the fleet out. Then Proctor knocked Hull back and cut him off, and he countered and took London, forcing Proctor out. Brock tried to take Fort Erie back and failed again. And then Chauncey took control of Lake Ontario with his frigates, but actually the British fleet was able to get back to Kingston. Up here, Scott basically moved up from Albany, forced back Drummond and Provost, but all the reinforcements that came into Quebec kind of blocked him here. But due to the activity along at Lake Erie and Upper Canada, most of the cards had to be used there instead of trying to push Scott back. And then on to summer and fall of 1814. So basically the last full turn. And that is game. The first card played on the summer and fall, autumn turn. The American player played Treaty of Ghent. They minus 8 victory points and dropped them from 20 down to 12. And they win. Basically, that's game. With that card, they were able to pull it out for the victory. And so that was a quick play on the final full turn. And so interesting play here, kind of more stalemated on the play. The Americans never cut the line here, basically because the big push all the way down to almost to Saratoga forced the American player to concentrate a lot of time and effort through 1813, but with that concentration, also the British did not do much in defense down here, and so it was still relatively weak, and with their officers not able to bring the reinforcements up from Quebec as quickly as the Americans were, and with some pretty poor die rolling by the British, the Americans held out. With the card play, they were able to win. So one of the perks of this game, because of the each 3 decks you play with for each year. You never play the same set of cards because there's always leftovers. It's very nice to this. So it's a very nice, quick little CDG, and with a lot of replay value because of that. And yeah, nice little game.